Welcome back to another episode of Re-Correlated Podcast. I'm Natalie, and we have Hollis back here this week with us. And we also have a very special guest. We have Erik Cunningham here, and he is a SOC director, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, guru of SOC. So, as the former SOC queen, I am in seventh heaven right now. Let's have a great conversation tonight. Erik, if you want to give us a little bit of an intro for you, who you are, where your background is, and then we can kind of kick it right on into the intro of the topic.
Yeah. So thanks, Natalie and Hollis, for having me on today. I'm Erik Cunningham. I'm the director of the Security Operations Center at Qzara CyberTorch. We are a woman-owned SBA 8A cybersecurity firm that specializes in providing SOC services for the defense industrial base and various government clients, as well as some commercial folks, right? So we are currently authorized at the FedRAMP high level, one of the only SOCs doing that. Before that, good experience across some Fortune 500s like PayPal, Bank of America. Did some defense contracting after I got out of the military. Was in the Navy for 8 years. And before that, I kind of thought I was going to wind up as a journalist for the longest time, right? Grew up in Illinois, wanted to go cover the Chicago Bulls, the Bears, etc. But yeah, the military offered me IT instead of mass communication specialist. So that's why we're here now.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, the military offered me paralegal, and then they were like, but you're going to do IT now. So, awesome. So today we are here to talk about unlocking our future potential and really how we go about interviewing entry-level candidates. I know Erik and you and I have had conversations. Hollis, you and I have had very similar conversations where, I just don't think that hiring managers are always very honest with themselves about what they're actually looking for or what type of skill set they actually need out of somebody who is truly entry level. So we're going to go ahead and give our hot takes. Erik, you can go first, Hollis, and then I'll follow up with mine, and then we'll move right into topic conversation.
No, Natalie, I think you brought up a really good point there in the sense that you don't always know when it's time to bring in entry-level talent, right? And there's some companies that just shouldn't be doing it. If you lack maturity, if you're just starting up, et cetera, right? Entry-level is not the way to go. Your entry-level job should still have 1 to 3 years of experience. But there is a time and a place when you absolutely should start doing it.
Yeah, I think what I've seen so far, right? I'm a network engineer, so I'm not so much into cyber, but when it comes to hiring entry-level people, the biggest issue I've seen so far is kind of, like you said, Natalie, setting the expectations of the hiring manager themselves. So depending on who the person is, they can come in really high level with it and expect, for example, with networking, the CCNP level out of a entry-level network engineer when you should probably expect the CCNA level VLANs and such. So really, it's just to me, a major issue of lowering your expectations or the hiring managers and not saying, well, I want them to be me. So.
Yeah. And I also think that you also have to look at how much is that entry-level person going to drive their own education too. And that's a hot take I want to bring up here is as the senior, you can't be the sole party that's responsible for driving somebody's education, that entry-level talent. You have to make sure that they have that drive and they have that motivation to go for it and just tackle things and to learn, because if they don't, then they're not going to be able to keep up. And so setting that as an organizational, from an organizational perspective, I think is also really key to creating a very solid entry-level program. So where do we want to start off with our conversation? I think I have a question for you, Erik, is when you are starting to look at we were ready to hire an entry-level position or somebody for an entry-level position, where do you start at with creating your interview questions?
Yeah, so I think, right, that the entry-level questions do have to look different. And to that point, you are really trying to assess drive and ability to learn quickly. I think standard for the most part is people say you need education, certification, and experience. You're not going to get that at the entry level, right? So you're looking for where they may have any of those. In that sense, right, I want to see, especially on entry level folks, resumes. Do a link to a GitHub, do a link to a Medium where you did a write-up. We see a lot of resumes where it just doesn't convey the experience that you have well, and sometimes including those links really helps. And that's going to help me shape an interview as well. Like, I want to ask you about random things on your resume. Like, we just interviewed someone, I would say recently, that it was very interesting. I mean, the guy was like a sports photographer and basically related how data privacy and things of that nature were cybersecurity concepts that were reinforced as he was going through school. So make that resume, especially at the entry level, something that I can kind of pick and choose maybe some unique things about you going into the interview. And if the resume doesn't convey that, then make it a point to try and find a way to incorporate it in the interview, right? Make yourself stand out in some way, shape, or form.
Hollis, what about you? Do you have any things that you would look for?
Yeah, so kind of going off of what Erik said, I usually try to gauge someone based on how they can relate concepts, right? So at the entry level for like a networking position, I try to find someone that can explain a topic, more of a simple topic, and explain like in 5 terms, if I can put it in that kind of way. So if someone could tell me I put a packet on a road and then it drives up the switch, right? And explain something like that in a way that an end user could see it, or someone that's fresher than them can see it. But I'm kind of looking at it more from a specialized perspective in those entry-level positions, right? You want more of a general sense of things. So I'm looking at too much in the technical sense, right?
I mean, yeah, but you can still look at the technical sense. Like, one of the things that I look at a lot is what kind of processes would I need somebody to be able to logic themselves through? And then I will throw them a question that's a very basic question about a basic process that they probably will have known how to do. My current company, we do how do you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, because we want to know how detailed somebody's going to be, right? So so you can get really creative to where you don't have to have it be completely technical, because we have an apprenticeship program that we built to where we want to bring people that have zero experience whatsoever and really transform their lives too. So that's the difference between our entry level program and somebody else's entry level program, where you might have somebody that still needs somebody with a little bit of knowledge there too. Very
and
valid.
That's where I kind of lack, right? So being in a senior position and really trying to find someone that can kind of be my backup puts it in a spot where I could get somebody entry level, but teaching those ropes and that depth is going to be a lot harder. So
yeah, absolutely. Now, and every organization, I think Erik, you brought this up, is it's finding that right timing and threshold for having an entry level program, an apprenticeship program or something like that, where you're truly bringing in true entry level talent. There has to be a level of commitment across the organization to really make that scalable, right?
Yeah,
Any
there
thoughts on that,
absolutely
Erik?
does, because you're going to take time away from people to train that person, right? And so you need to be at the point where people can give up that time, where processes are mature and everything from a day-to-day standpoint is smooth. And for the love of God, don't try to do it if you do not have a good onboarding process in place already. So with us, and this has been pretty much everywhere I've been, you're going to get assigned a buddy. They're going to bring you into team calls. We're going to walk you through scenarios, challenge you, and you're going to have to hit milestones before we start letting you work on more of the live scenarios, right? And the program is set up to help you progress that way with kind of minimal, I don't want to call it babysitting, but minimal training, where you have to be shadowing someone for 8 hours of the day, right? We want to see, after a little bit of time, you going out and being able to do that independent work, even if it's not live fire, right? It might be a historical alert incident, and then kind of bring it back there, right? But it starts with your onboarding program. And to that point, I love this topic. I'm a bit of a maniac about it. I want to own the process end to end with the stakeholders, right? So for me, pretty much everywhere I've been, hey, HR, like, what are the current problems in the hiring process? And usually it's the same thing, right? Managers aren't engaged enough. They don't want to give time to hiring, things of that nature. And in my last role, we moved hiring time down from like, I think 6 weeks down to about 2, just from good candidates, right? We leave it open. Usually just based on the team, we knew who we were looking for, and could hire someone quick. You schedule interviews quickly, everyone's bought into the process, and you make that your top priority, right? Because as soon as you bring someone on, even if it's a junior level, like at the end of the day, it's going to make everyone else's lives easier. So, make that your top priority, take that pressure off your team, get that person in, and do it as quickly as humanly possible.
Yeah, because you'll lose talent if you don't if you don't have a fast turnaround time on. And I've been in those situations before where I was like, okay, that's the person we want. And then like 2 weeks later, they're like, oh, well, maybe now we'll go for it. And it's already like, we're already a month into the process of hiring. And you're just like, well, they actually already accept another offer. So no.
Yep.
And
If
that's
you
always a
aren't
bummer.
Amazon if you aren't Amazon or another FANG company, like, why is it taking you so long to hire? You're not bringing them on site. We're not having them do leak code level cybersecurity engineering, things of that nature, right? Make it quick. If you know it's a good candidate, pull the trigger and get them on board.
Exactly. All right. So what else with like entry level do you want to talk about, Eric? I'm going to leave this topic up to you. This
Yeah.
topic starter.
Yeah. So I'll kind of touch back on that education, certification, and experience thing, right? In my experience with school in a bachelor's program, usually you're going to get 2 out of the 3, and it's depending on the school you go to, right? So there may be some more research heavy, hands-on, in-person schools where you are going to get your courses and you're going to do a lot of labs in those courses, right? You'll get to do hands-on, and it's on you to really convey those projects in your resume. Put it on a web page, again, do some write-ups, if that's allowed by the school, just to kind of convey that experience. I myself, I'm a master's graduate of Western Governors University. So for me, I got education and certification from that program, right? Not a lot of technical experience, but at that point, I just got it last month. So I've been in the field almost 15 years now. Experience is covered, and it's cool to get some more certifications and continue your education in that sense. So I think you're going to get 2 of the 3 via school. I'm sure everyone remembers the phase about a year ago where everyone in their LinkedIn profile had top 3% and try hack me. It got to the point where it was not a differentiator for anyone whatsoever. Everyone just kind of had that distinction. And then you get them in an interview and you're like, hey, walk me through that box then. And people can't do it, right? So, have your write-ups, have your things that you can refer to. And that's really the way to kind of fill in all 3, in my opinion, especially at that entry level.
Yeah, I went through a technical college because I only have an associate's and then certifications, but that's really it. So I went to a technical college, and where that really helped was we had a lot of projects. So like and we actually had like a whole course that was like getting your career in the right track, starting it off on the right track, right? So like we got like resume help, we had to build portfolios and stuff like that. So I've always just like had like projects that I can like could refer to, like, oh, I did this as a school project, and like just like send that to the hiring manager, especially when I was first trying to get in. I did that a lot. So that's definitely a great way, is like keep those projects as your portfolio for later, that if you do need something to pull up in the middle of an interview, you can. I've had those interviews where people have been like, can I share my screen and show you this awesome thing that I did? And I'm like, absolutely. Show me your report.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
One of the big
It's
I do apologize, Eric.
no, go ahead, Alice. I already had my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think one of the big issues with 4-year bachelors in the traditional like brick and mortar is that a lot of times those programs are so outdated. So, for example, when I was going through in my college, I was back in 2018 to 2022. they weren't like cloud should have been a big thing, right? Like that should have been a good part of the program, like a good majority of it. And it wasn't, right? It was traditional networking, traditional systems, traditional security, like even just a little bit of it. And even touching into the networking itself, it was mostly using IP tables and trying to figure out port forwarding and things like that. So in most bachelor's programs, I'd definitely like to see a lot more actual projects and things that kind of invoke thought. Now, I will say, like the senior project for a lot of these things, usually you can have somebody that will dive in really deep and do some extraordinary thing or something off the wall. But I'd say you probably have like a 5% of your students in these IT programs that actually do something like that, or instead of doing the bare minimum to pass. So I'd like to see a lot more standards out of it. And I think it's a big whole industry issue is that our standards aren't really standards.
So I can actually speak to why that is, why it takes so long for our curriculums to kind of catch up, because I've had Brandon Keith on here previously, and that's what he does is like literally create training. So he's a good friend of mine, and he said that it's because for it to get through the accreditation aspect, it takes about 3 years to get any kind of curriculum change through that accreditation. That's why it's always like so outdated. So what I'd really like to see come out of it is maybe a better way of getting curriculums for career fields like ours and like the medical field that really can't wait around for this to be added into their curriculum to be able to accredit a different way.
And to that point, think of how much something like generative AI has come along in even the last year. And if they were to develop a curriculum for that, it would seem like Stone Age level technology probably in 3 years, right? It's just not going to cut it. So I think that also goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, though, finding the ways to really preach the fundamentals and process and get that as the cornerstone of the program.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anybody knows how to get those laws changed for accreditation, please let us know, because we'd all love to help this problem.
Yeah. I think the other thing that those colleges could focus more on is the troubleshooting process. I think a lot of IT just having the base troubleshooting process, if you can think A plus B equals C, then IT is usually for you, right? If you can do those formulas and equations, right, you should be able to formulate, well, if this system does this, then this, right? So
I'd also like to see them expand on critical thinking skills as well in those college programs. Just because like there are plenty of times where, and especially in cyber, A plus B does not always equal C. Sometimes it equals D, sometimes it equals F, sometimes it equals D. Who knows? It just all depends on the day and the environment, right?
Yeah, again, I think it goes back to just what is the base level, first principle, fundamental, and then just kind of go from there. But yeah, that's something I can tell you even in my day to day, I don't like to write down completely, hey, follow this process A to Z, because it's never going to work out that way. And that's probably something we need to teach too, right? Like, hey, maybe one in every 100 problems you come across, it's going to be this nice, straightforward thing. But we want to make sure that's built in.
Well, and that's why you guys have like triage. And so you have an L1 that reviews it, and then it goes up to an L2 that reviews it. And then if they can't resolve the issue, then it goes to an L3. And generally, when you have those kind of situations, like your L3 then follows back up with the will later on follow back up with the L1 and L2 and explain like why like how they resolved it. Or at least in my
exactly,
opinion,
yep.
Should be done.
No, that's the way it's built in with the tiers, right? The person who's smarter always needs to be training. We've always built kind of roadmaps for people to get to L2, L3 to branch off into cloud engineering, to branch off into threat hunting, threat detection, building, et cetera, right? So I think, again, if you're going to hire entry level, those pathways need to be built in as well on how to get them to L2 or to understand what they want to do in their career and start walking them towards that path.
So I know we've also talked about like knowing the right time to pull in entry level versus when you're needing to like maybe diversify your talent at the very beginning. So Erik, in your opinion, like where would you start at trying to figure out if you're even at a point, if your org's even at a point to try to like bring in entry level? Like, how would you determine that?
Yeah, are your processes defined well? Do your senior people understand all of your environments, your alerts? Do you have a good alert tuning process in place so that we are not going to introduce a new person to an alerting queue with 80 to 90% false positives? Things of that nature. If you're still working on other big things and figuring those out, it is not the time to bring in entry level talent. If you have a lot of turnover, it's not the time to bring in entry level talent, because the last thing you want to do is bring in someone and they're like, yeah, I'm either going to be miserable for 6 months and move on, or in the case of the smart ones, they'll look at this place for 2 weeks and be like, this ain't worth my time. So yeah, the other stuff definitely has to be in place. We've experimented with doing it a couple different ways where we've gotten great referrals from people who are breaking into the field, and they've shown, some good aptitude towards it. We've worked with some folks where we've done what I would call a trial. I don't want to call it an internship because they're still paid. They're still getting all the opportunities. But it's like, hey, we're going to give you 90 days to kind of see how this works out, and then we'll convert you to, an FTE at the end of the day. So there's different ways to get them in, and you don't have to just take a chance, right? You can hedge against them maybe not working out and maybe do some performance incentives up front. But yeah, I think whatever works for you to bring them in once you're mature, start doing it.
So you said something that kind of piqued my interest. You said you hate to call it an internship because you pay them. Do you feel that internships should ever be unpaid?
No, you should never do work for free, especially if it's something you're good at, right? It's an old adage, even for college kids, right? Go out and see if you can get paid. And as a last resort, maybe if they have some perks or something, or it's in your hometown and things of that nature. But I don't believe in unpaid internships. Nowhere I've worked has really believed in that. So yeah, if you're good at something, make sure you're getting paid for it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think like the only place I could understand it is if we were doing something for like a nonprofit or like a complete like 501(c) or 503(c) or whatever it is. And it's a true nonprofit and they're not making a like they're probably looking for an intern that can help them. You're gaining experience. Like that's really the only time I feel like you're probably not going to be taking advantage as like a hiring manager of hiring somebody and not paying them, as if like that's the situation. That's like literally it. Maybe like a church as well. I could see somebody volunteering their time at churches and stuff.
Absolutely. If everyone around you isn't getting paid, it's okay at the end of the day, I think. But if you're the only one in the room not getting a paycheck out of it, then reevaluate.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I've always like thought that we would pay like not apprentices, because at my company that was never a question, but like previous positions I've had, like I've always thought that like no, our interns will always be paid, even if it's like
absolutely
what we can pay them, we're paying them.
And if your neighbor
go ahead, Alice.
Yeah, if your neighbor offers you food for fixing their printer, take that opportunity.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I have seen some cool programs where maybe they have a deal with the college where it's going to be a multi-year internship and people are aware up front, hey, it's not going to be paid. But I know some companies, I used to live in Phoenix, where they had some partnerships with Arizona State. And those people would come back every year and do something different to get exposed to different levels. I guess in a case like that, maybe, it's coming every year, it's guaranteed, and you're going to get some good projects. Something like that is not awful at the end of the day, but still not ideal.
Yeah, I could see it. I saw when I was like trying to gain experience and like get up into the field, right? I saw a lot of times there were companies that were just like willing to take advantage of you. And I was like, no, because I know what my work product's going to be like. And you're not getting my time for free. Like I'm just not willing to do it even for one day. Like,
I mean, I feel that way in interviews as well, right? For senior level folks, occasionally you'll get hit with that. Hey, can you give me a multi-page case study and this, that, and the other? And when I get those, usually it's, hey, here's my consulting rate per hour. This is what I would expect to be paid to provide you something like this without any guarantee of employment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because time's money, man. And that's how the company's going to
Absolutely.
feel about it too. So time is money for everybody here. Hollis, what else? What questions do you have? I want to make sure everybody gets the chance to talk.
So I do apologize. Shortbread's whining, so that's why I muted myself. So, I mean, I don't have many questions, right? Because I haven't been in like a hiring manager position or a slot like that. So, I would honestly probably say, what would be a way as a person in a senior position that I could attempt to transform my company or our process to get better at training individuals, right? So I'll give an example. I had an intern that came in and I did my best at teaching them the fundamentals of networking, but there's some things that I can't throw you into, like why is this OSPF link flapping or why is this BGP link flapping? I can give you access to routers to read and things like that, but I don't. And I'll frame this way: I have two people right now on my networking team. It's myself and another individual. Me being the senior, him being the level one. I don't know what would be the best process if we brought on another intern of how to attempt.
No,
So
I think that's an awesome question. Go ahead, Natalie.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'll let you go. You're the guest.
Oh, okay. No, I was going to say, we've run into that problem with several of the places I've worked at, and it's basically learning from the mistakes that you make with one person, right? And you need to be obsessed with efficiency in your onboarding process. Again, that needs to be revisited every time you either hire on a new person or a group of new people. Your 30-day check-in should be like, hey, what did we do bad? And like, please, in that first 30 days, I hope you've built up some ability for them to express how they feel. I'm big on that kind of whole radical candor thing where like, hey, tell me if I'm messing up, and get that good feedback and kind of re-implement it into your program, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say the feedback is crucial. Also, having resources that you can give to them to make them able to chase and have that drive to pursue. So like just having resources available. I know a lot of times there'll be times where I'm like, hey guys, here's some great documents that you can go look at, or like, create a wiki page of them and just have them all in there and labeled with what they are and like what point you want to. The other thing is, I mean, Hollis, you worked with me at the last company, and it was kind of like the wild west of like hiring and training. Like we always hired and trained entry level, but like I didn't have anything like really formulated out and really like officially polished. And so when I came to my new company and I got experience with how they had their apprenticeship program like really structured, that in itself was like a game changer, because now you have somebody who's a junior that whenever you're bored, here's where I want you to go look, and right here's what I want you to go train on and go do in your time. That way it's not all of your time spent on training them individually.
Yeah, absolutely. To kind of add on to that, we're a Microsoft partner in my current role, and the end goal for a lot of people is that SC200 Microsoft Security Operations Analyst certification, right? So if you're bored, hey, go over these concepts. We get some nice certification vouchers. Shout out to the Microsoft Intelligence Security Association for those. And the end goal that we want everyone is to really progress and get that right. So sometimes it's putting that carrot on the end of the stick for them to get an opportunity to do something. In past roles, it's been some cool stuff, like an actual SOC challenge coin that we've issued, once they hit all the milestones. But to your point, yeah, a checklist where they can kind of self-police and self-learn is also super helpful.
Yeah, those are just some things that I know that like from having less of a structured plan on how to train entry level and then coming to a much more structured, I was like, oh, this is a game changer. This is how you're doing this. Oh, okay. But yeah, I would also agree with you, Erik. You learn lessons of like what you've messed up in the past and you just get better at it as time goes on. you're like, oh, I remember this analogy worked one time 3 years ago, and then you'll just randomly use it again 3 years later, and you're like, oh, look at that, it still works.
Look at that, it still clicks. Go into the bag of tricks that you have, right?
And also recording trainings also helps, so that like somebody can actually like go and look back at their training, so that like, you know, then they can come to you with questions in your one-on-one and have like something kind of like formulated. Those are all things.
I know we're
Those
talking
are all
about
little tricks I have.
We were talking about it before the call, but going through some of our audits, when we're talking to the auditors, we'll get permission to record those calls. If they're like, hey, walk us through the engineering of the solution, right? And like, hey, wait a minute, this would be a good thing to throw to someone coming on board, so they get the whole overview right up front. So yeah, absolutely. Figure out what you can record and kind of chuck over, as long as you're not making a ton of changes or anything, right?
Yeah, and as long as they have the need to know, because I will be the first one to say separation of duties is still important, especially in FedRAMP land.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, what other topics haven't we talked about that you want to kind of talk about with like interviewing and training and bringing on entry level talent, Erik?
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I don't think we've really touched upon interviewing, and I think I've talked about this a few times, but it is on you as a hiring manager, if someone is having a bad interview, to do everything you can to get them out of it, right? So you can't just chalk it up 5 minutes in and be like, oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing, right? It's on you, especially with those folks where this is it could be their first like actual live SOC analyst interview, to kind of help them out as much as you can. And you know, one of the ways I'll do that is I won't call it an interview, I won't call it an audition, anything like that. I'll just go through our intro and I'll be like, hey, you know, give us your little elevator pitch, whatever you want to call it. And then from there, we'll go into a conversation. And that's all you are really trying to do, is make it as conversational as possible, kind of like we're doing right now, right? I want to go back and forth. If I see you stuttering, things like that, it's like, no, man, just get it wrong. Like, the worst thing you're going to say is something silly and we can talk about it. And I'll do that even in senior level interviews, right? Where if they don't know something or they mess something up a little, it's like, oh, like, you know, are you sure about that? Or here's kind of how I see it. What do you think about that, right? But it's on you to really make them feel good and feel confident when you can see that the eyes either glaze over or they start to stutter, stumble, things of that, to bring them back and try and get them to be the best they can.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I actually have an interview question that I formulated for specifically for entry level, and I'll use it across the board for like any interview. It's still one of my favorite interview questions to ask. But like my last question of every interview that I run is, you know, I'm a firm believer that everybody has one or two unique qualities that are unique to them, but that make them stand out, but that also help contribute to a team. Can you tell me what those are for you? What those one or two qualities are for you? That's just an easy win at the end that just like gives them the power back and makes them feel like just empowered at the end of it to come out strong with a strong close to their interview. But also throughout the interview, like I've had people that were like, you know, another one of my favorite questions to ask on an entry level interview is like, if you were going to hack into or attack a network, how would you do it? Because there's so many different options you can go with. There's really not a wrong answer unless you're just like, I don't know. Like, that's really the only wrong answer. And that's still not even that wrong. Like, if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know is fine, as long as you're like, and I've not known a lot of things, but I've found out how to get that answer by X, Y, and Z, right? You can really turn that around when you don't know the answer to a question. To your point, yeah, I kind of save that one at the end too. And I say, hey, I know there's something you wanted to talk about and something we missed. And so now's your chance to kind of bring that up, right? Like, what did you want to talk about that I just kind of blabbered on about and didn't let you get to? So yeah, have something for that. I always hate when people are like, I don't have anything. It was a good interview. I'm like, oh, that was your chance.
So
here's the other. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So when is it okay for in those type of questions to say I'd ask ChatGPT?
I mean, I use ChatGPT for a lot. So yeah, if you are using it, good on you. And let me know like if you're going to tell me that, I'll be like, oh, what have you used Chat GPT for in the past? Like, what has it taught you? Did you confirm if that knowledge is correct? Right. So that's cool. It opens another line of questioning, in my opinion.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I would want to see the research if somebody's saying that they looked at ChatGPT, that they're not just taking that for like 100% fact, that they're also doing a little bit of additional research. Like maybe it's just an additional source or something. Or like they are actually if they're able to tell me like how they've parsed data out to protect, confidential data too. That's also very important to me, at least.
I saw a great quote the other day. I think it was from Adam Grant, right, the org psychologist from Wharton, and it was, previously we had information scarcity, so the people who knew the most were, the most valued in the society, and now we have information overload, and it's really the people who know how to make sense of that information who are going to succeed. And a question like that is, I think, great, right? It shows that you want to figure something out, you know how to go get the data and go from there.
Yep. So would you dive in, and I don't mean to dig into the question further, but would you potentially ask something about how would you structure the question to ChatGPT, or how would you actually go about asking the AI for that information?
Yeah. Walk me through some prompt engineering then. It's cool. I think that question can go a lot of different ways. Like I expect people, hey, what do you do when you don't know something? I Google it. Like that's the right answer. That's never the wrong answer, in my opinion. I Google stuff every day. I think I always tell people, I have not had a day in this field yet where there's not something I don't know and I need to ask someone, go to Google, or now, yay, Chat GPT. So it's part of being in the field at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's all about what the way my old NCO used to say. He said it's always about being able to find the information, not necessarily knowing the information right off the top of your head too. I mean, obviously that's not what the certification people want us to know, but hashtag facts, you will always use Google in your career. Like if you're using Google and you think that it's wrong, you're doing the right thing. Just keep doing that.
Yep. I mean, even SANS lets you have the book in front of you at the end of the day, right? So some of them haven't figured out that, let's give them the information and see what they do with it.
Me putting my fist up to Cisco. So
yeah, I don't miss Cisco tests at all. Studying for my CISP, and I still do not miss Cisco at all.
I've got to finish my CCNP Enterprise, and I don't want to do it. So
yeah, I could barely make it through the ones that I made it through. So I don't know how you do it. Hollis, you are a hero.
It's dry material. I usually drink a glass of water prior, and then I can attempt to digest it. But anyways, that was a bad joke, so I'm gonna lead off with that.
But yeah, so I think structuring your interviewing process is very, very important. And as the hiring manager, it is on you. I think that's everything about the interview is on you. How that interview runs, how comfortable the entry level person feels, in that interview. That's all on you to set that tone. So like as the hiring manager, you should think about those things. Like what kind of tone do I want to set with the questions that I'm asking? Am I going out there to murder this person with like just being like, oh, I don't know anything, like, and make them feel really crappy about themselves at the end of the interview? Or do you want to be a good leader and like, make them feel empowered at the end of the interview? How do you want them to lead that interview? And even if they don't get that position that time, like what do you want them to leave with? How do you want to make them feel as they're leaving that interview, right?
I think one of my favorite things that anyone's ever done for me is I was interviewing for a network security position, and they gave me the interview questions prior. They allowed me to see what they were going to ask, and during the process, it was, at least from what I thought they were doing, was picking out who had the best process, like we talked about earlier. And then after the interview and after they did offer me the position, but I couldn't take it because I didn't live close enough and I didn't want to move. But they gave me feedback on the actual questions themselves and whether it was something like they had a different expectation or if it was spot on. And I wish there was the ability to have more of that, but I know a lot of opportunities don't offer that. So
I will say that a lot of times companies take a risk doing that. And just because if you didn't choose a candidate for X, Y, and Z, that becomes a risk in itself. Like if you give them the reason why you didn't choose them or like what you were kind of expecting. So like as like a hiring manager, if that's somebody that you wanted to then mentor afterwards, maybe like offer them to connect with them on LinkedIn or something too. That's always a valid option. That way, you know, they're aware of future opportunities, but as well as that are available at your company and other companies that, like, you know, you might have a connection with in your network and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. That non-official capacity on feedback. And I've had people, you know, that have gotten the notice that, hey, you weren't hired, and then they might reach out and I'll say, hey, like all of this is unofficial. Here's some things you can improve on, right? I'm not going to say directly why you weren't hired, but you can maybe read between the lines and figure out from there. But you don't want to put a company at risk by saying something you said and then, hey, that's a discriminatory hiring practice on accident. And yeah, you're putting yourself in trouble.
Yeah, no, fair.
Yeah,
it was mostly like technical questions, right? So it was more so like this question was about like BGP routing, right? So
yeah.
I never really thought of it.
Flirted with it.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've flirted with the idea of giving those questions beforehand, but I think if you're going to do it in like even in a technical capacity, because as we mentioned, right, if their Google's good, their ChatGPT's good, they're going to be able to give you a good textbook answer. I don't want them to send a questionnaire back. I want them to explain it to me so I can kind of see the body language. I can see if they're reading off a screen next to them, things like that. And then, you know, from there, I may have 3 or 4 more questions kind of in the hole based off that one to test a level of knowledge or see if they really understand the process. But I don't think it's a bad practice at all.
Yeah. And I've had where we've sent like, you know, an exercise over, which was like a process writing exercise, like a quick process writing exercise, not like more than an hour or something like that, but like a quick writing like a process writing exercise. And we sent that over beforehand. I like picking questions for the interview as we're going through the interview sometimes too, like to be able to, like you said, have something that you want to kind of expand on that idea and see where their thought process is at. Even if you're not like gauging what their answer is, you're just gauging like where does their brain kind of levitate to.
Right. So one more thing I'd like to cover from an interview perspective too, and we kind of touched on it, is that question at the end that everyone likes to ask. It's like, oh, do you have any questions for us? Right. I refuse to not be interviewed by you if you sit down for an interview with me. That the answer, oh, I don't have anything, is not allowed. I will get to the point where I'm like, do you not want to know what my favorite color is? Or do you want to see my dog that might be right next to me, or things like that, right? That's a golden opportunity for you. I want to be interviewed at the end of the day. I like getting questions like, hey, what's the culture like? You know, I've been taken by surprise, but I've really enjoyed the question. Hey, why did the last person leave? And I'm happy to be transparent in those scenarios, right? Like, I like when people are like, hey, what does onboarding look like? What's the 30, 60, 90-day plan? So, you know, I don't know actually is a wrong answer in that case.
Yeah, I think some of my favorite questions to ask after an interview usually have been around what does your training program look like and how do you see me fitting into this position? How do my responsibilities or my resume, how does that seem to fit into this position? And how do you see my day-to-day going if I did get picked for this position? So it's a couple of my go-tos, but.
Great.
Yeah, I will actually write down what the person asked me question-wise as well when I'm interviewing somebody, just because like, I think that if you ask questions the right way, like, because like anybody can ask you what's your culture like, and almost everywhere it's going to be like, we're a family here. Like, like it's great culture. And then you're like, okay, well, what does that actually mean? So you do have to kind of like like when somebody asks me a really slick way of like asking, I'm like, oh, I'm taking notes for the next time I have to interview and like ask questions of a culture, because that was a really slick way to get the answer that they just got. And so not only am I taking up my own notes for myself, but also like if you're asking the right kind of questions, like that to me, I feel is a data point in it of itself of like what kind of, how do you think, how does your brain work?
Yeah, I mean,
Are you able to think
when you
critically?
say I don't know, yeah, it shows that you aren't curious. And like, I don't know, especially at the entry level, I need curious people.
Yeah, I've had some lately where because like we do different types of interviews, like so like it's not just like a one and done interview with where I work at. We split it up amongst different people on different teams and stuff like that. So like there's a culture type of interview, and then there's like a culture fit more so, and then there's like more of your like technical expertise. And like I do like having it that way, because I used to be completely against doing it more than one interview. I was like, one interview is enough. But then I do like the way that they split it up. And so unfortunately on some of the like culture fit ones, unfortunately our founder loves to talk about our company, so he answers all their questions like right up front, and they're like, yeah, we don't have any for you. And I'm like, please let me say something awesome. Ask me a question anyway. Hollis, I think we're about ready to wrap up. So Hollis, do you have any final thoughts on interviewing? And
Yeah, so not so much interviewing, but I do have a good takeaway of potentially how to structure a program for an internship or someone that comes into a place of work like mine, where there's two people, and we're kind of just pushing things along. So yeah, I think in the future, what I've taken from this is actually taking the time to document some things and get together notes on the process that we run through. A lot of times I struggle because I don't document some of my processes, and not doubt myself, right? So say I'm doing a like a SD-WAN migration, and I have these 4 routers that I connect to, and I need to fix these lists. It's in my head really well, but it'd
it's
look a
always
lot
in your
better on
head.
paper.
Well,
So
yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Hollis, the first rule is always documentation.
you'd think I'd know that, and I would like to think that I know that, but the little thing in there doesn't tick sometimes.
That's like
good.
almost a week one thing for me when I come into a new role is where is the tribal knowledge and how do we eliminate it and get it on paper? So yeah, I completely understand.
Yeah, and it's always hard to be like, there's one person that's like, let's get it all on paper, and then everybody else is like, you get it all on paper. And then you're like, well, no, we all need to do it. And they're like, no, just one person's enough. And you're like, no, it's really not.
And then you bring in the intern or the person you're going to trial, and it's like, what am I doing? And it's like documentation. And then they're like, I hate this field, right? So yeah, you need to be careful with that.
So my rule is always, it's never entry level's job, like an entry level person's job, to necessarily write the documentation. Like everybody gets a turn at writing documentation eventually, but like it's never their job right off the bat to write the documentation, but it is their job to, if there's something missing in the documentation, to catch that and put it in the documentation for everybody else after them to use, right? So anything like that, all that kind of knowledge, like as we go along, if you find something that's missing, or we maybe had to go into a question, you need to document that now.
It was my favorite thing in the military whenever we'd get a new perspective gain that they weren't going to write the documentation, but I have, hey, this book of stops, walk through like 4 or 5 of these, and if you can't do it, I need to rewrite it. So yeah, you can use them for that purpose as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been a really great conversation. Erik, what are your final thoughts, your key takeaways from this episode? Go ahead.
Yeah, again, I think the entry level is something companies need to look at. They need to come up with a process for it. We hire at the entry level. Obviously, I don't think there's a talent shortage at that level, but we still need to bring people into the field to get them to that
mid and senior level of experience. And so it's on you as a program to really define a way on how you're going to onboard and develop talent once you know that you can do it, right? We owe it to ourselves as an industry to find ways to bring people in and make their lives easier at the end of the day.
I would agree. Hollis, key takeaways, final takeaways, any final thoughts from you?
I thought that one earlier was mine.
I just want to make sure that you didn't have any others, okay? Because sometimes you have other thoughts. All right.
Look, I know I'm slow to process, but it happens, right? It's little Windows 64 up here, right? You got to give it a second.
I got it. I got you.
Or 96, I mean, not 64.
My final takeaways would be, as a senior, make sure that you remember what it was like to be a junior, and that, you know, having a strong senior and giving people that benefit of the doubt, because every time they will rise to the occasion and they will surprise you. Entry level talent always surprises me, like how much they actually just like know, especially like the younger generations that grew up with computers their entire life, that kind of thing. Gen Z, they really know a lot more about technology than I did when I was their age, right? So like giving those benefits of the doubt and let them rise to the occasion, give them that right opportunity. But don't forget that like you're now the senior, so you're the one that is kind of the scary and trying to kind of mend that gap as much as you can before the interview or at the very beginning of the interviews, just so that they're aware and setting the right stage. So those are my key takeaways. Erik, we appreciate you so much for hopping on with us. It has been a wonderful, wonderful discussion, and we hope to have you back in the near future. And we will be back in a couple weeks with our next episode, guys. So have a great rest of your evening. And yeah, that's all I got. Awkwardly wave bye, everybody.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.